Welcome back to this episode of the Transfer Portal CFB podcast and YouTube channel presented by NoContextCFB. And today we are talking some spring football. We have Quinn Ewers versus Arch Manning, 1,000 recruit versus 1,000 recruit. Pac-12 teams transitioning to the Big 12. And Saban once again talking to the media about the modern day NIL situation in college football. But first, let's just give a quick shout out to our fantastic staff. Everyone on our team's working great. So make sure you check out all their articles on our website at thetransferportalcfb.com. Make sure you give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. And today I am joined by Parker. Is it Gillum or Gillum?
Gillum.
Okay, yeah. Parker Gillum. All right. And by the way, it's Andrew, of course, for all those that don't know. Parker, man, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Good to be back. Second straight week and kind of getting into the groove of it. So, yeah, good to be here.
And as we were talking a little bit before, this is the first time that you and I ever really spoke face-to-face. So I just want to be for one to say welcome to the team. I appreciate you being on that pod last week. You did great on it. So what kind of early thoughts? I mean, you've been here for about 2 to 3 weeks. What are your thoughts so far being part of the team?
Oh, yeah, it's been awesome. I mean, I love the freedom we get to have to kind of, especially in the off season, pick and choose, what topics we really want to cover. Definitely a lot of fun. And everybody I've been talking to is kind of a college football junkie just like me. So it's been really fun to meet other people like that. So
now that we are in spring, we got to talk about 1,000 recruit versus 1,000 recruit. We got Quinn Ewers, who's going to be a redshirt sophomore, going up against the nephew of a prodigy, Arch Manning. Nephew of a prodigy. Was Peyton Manning a prodigy? I mean, he was a great player. So, nephew of a legend, Arch Manning. So, Steve Sarkisian kind of already getting some smoke screen up already, saying that QB competition starts now, and that Quinn, he mentioned Quinn's talent, but he says he doesn't want Arch Manning to be held back at any point during spring as we go into fall camp also. Ironically enough, I work with a ton of UT alumni, and one guy came up to me earlier today, and he's like, you think Steve Sarkisian means it, or do you think he's throwing a smoke screen? So, Parker, before we let's go right into it. I mean, how do you feel this quarterback battle is going to go into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think he means it purely because I don't think there's any benefit to naming Ewers the starter right now, unless you want to give him that confidence. But, I think why not let Arch push him until fall camp and throughout that as well. And just, see what happens. I mean, if Arch comes in as a world beater and everything he was hyped up to be, you can't keep him off the field, And for me personally, I think Ewers showed enough last season to have the starting job this year, as long as, something drastic doesn't happen in camp. I think he was really efficient when he was out there on the field. He spread the ball around well, utilized all those weapons really well. Some injuries and a little bit inconsistency held him back at times, but he was still relatively young. This was still his first season as a starter at a high level program like that. So went through some bumps in the road, but I really think next season he's got potential. I mean, I have him as a Heisman dark horse, frankly. I think if everything comes together for Texas, which is a big if. But yeah, I mean, I liked what I saw from last year, and I don't trust Arch Manning. I'm not totally on the boat of, he's got this ranking off his last name, but I do wonder if he is legitimately everything they're hyping him up to be. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm still wondering. We'll have to see on the field, but I think Ewers takes the job.
I kind of I went up to that coworker today, and he was kind of, when he was asking me hey, is this just a smokescreen? And I was like, I'm pretty sure it's a smokescreen. Let's be honest, Arch Manning, he's going to be a true freshman. No quarterback in the country, not even Caleb Williams, went into a program week one and just took it over that, it's impossible as a true freshman to just take the playbook, learn every play, learn all your offensive schemes, learn your offensive line motions, learn all your wide receiver routes. It's impossible to do it as a true freshman. And you know what? I agree with you with Quinn. I mean, you could easily argue that if Quinn stays healthy for that Alabama game, they the Longhorns probably beat Bama right there at DKR, and probably gives Alabama their biggest loss in a long time. I mean, it's honestly insane to think about how crazy that day was. And going into that game, Texas was a 21-point underdog. Quinn gets injured, and it's still a one possession game. Essentially came down to a it was one on a field goal, but that was all for Texas's win to gain. And I think Quinn's going to still get this job. I mean, and who knows? I mean, he could get this Heisman season that you're talking about. He could get first round NFL draft hype. I mean, if he has as strong of a season that I think he can under another year under Steve Sark's system, I think there's no telling this to know how far this offense of Texas can go. I mean, you're still going to have Xavier Worthy there at wide receiver. Now, you lost your top two running backs from this past season. But I really think that Texas fans and college football fans in general, I think they need to keep an eye on a running back that could have transferred, but he did not transfer. Second-year guy, Jaden Blue, who is a running back out of Klein Cain High School here in Houston, Texas. And he actually has not played football since his junior year of high school, due for the sole purpose that he sat out his senior year of high school just to focus on college. He's going to be playing his first snaps in 2 years, I believe that's what it is. He sat through two seasons essentially, and I think he's an explosive running back. He was among the best running backs in the country as a junior in high school. I think he's a hidden gem for Texas at this point. So I really think Quinn has a lot to offer for this Texas offense.
Yeah, and I would also argue, college football fans have this tendency to, whenever a shinier jewel comes into the mix from a recruiting class, they want to see them on the field as quickly as possible. And that really, it doesn't work out in a lot of cases, So I think the other part of that is, there would be so much if Arch comes in, starts as a true freshman at the University of Texas this season, A, with the schedule that they have, and B, just with the already, pressure that exists within that fan base, it would be a lot for him to take on his shoulders in year one to be now the face of the Texas football program. And I just think that's asking too much, especially for his long-term development. You look at Arch, he will be the starter one day more than likely. So what is the best for him long-term in this first season? I think you let him play behind Ewers. I think he will certainly get snaps throughout the season, either in garbage time or, hopefully not. But if Ewers gets injured, Arch may have to come in some relief work. So he's going to get his opportunities and we're going to get to see what he's capable of. But I think it's smarter all around for him to start further down the line, because I do think he's got a lot of potential. I think he's sneaky athletic, which I think will bode well for him in college, especially at Texas. So yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued to see how he develops over this year. But a counterpoint to that though is that there's so much pressure on Texas this season to be successful, as there is every year. But if they start losing and Ewers isn't playing as well, I would imagine that there is a fairly short leash on Ewers, and that Sark would pull him in favor of Arch if they drop, 1, 2, 3 games within the first, 2 months of the season. So also interested to see, is Ewers looking over his shoulder the entire regular season? That always plays a factor with starters that are looking back at the freshmen. So I'll be interested to see kind of the mental game between kind of the two of them and Sarkisian.
I will say this about Arch. Just imagine how poetic it would be. We are 1 year away from Texas being in the SEC. And let's just say, hypothetically, Quinn doesn't play well week 1. I think they're playing Rice. I think that's who they're playing. So there's no way he doesn't play well. But let's just say he hypothetically gets injured. I do not wish for injuries, okay? I am not from New Orleans. I do not wish hexes on anybody. But just imagine the poetry of week 2 in Tuscaloosa. Arch Manning, who comes from SEC royalty, playing against Alabama at Bryant-Denny.
They would give him a proper SEC welcome.
That would be the deadliest SEC welcome I think I could give. I think right now Quinn's the safe bet. I mean, I would expect Texas to be the favorite going into the Big 12 this year. There is zero reason for you to just throw in Arch. It's just way too high of a risk. It could be a high ceiling to play Arch this season, but Quinn's got the experience. He's been in college. He's been in college for the last 2 years. He's been under two different offensive systems. He's got the exposure. I just think right now you just got to play Quinn. It just makes the most sense going into this next season. And in terms of can we see Archman this season? Like I said, I'm not wishing injuries on Quinn whatsoever, but I do think you are going to see a couple games from Texas this year where you will see big blowouts. You are going to see a lot of garbage time. So why not throw in Arch in the fourth quarter of a couple games if you're up by 21 in the fourth quarter? Let him sling it. Let's at least just see what we got here. I just want to know just how special can Arch be in his first couple years? Is it going to be, you know, a fantasy, the perfect fairy tale of all time? Or are we just going to get another Graham Mertz story from 2020 where he goes 23 for 24 and is just a bust for the rest of his career? I don't think it's going to be that bad, but let's be honest, we are also excited to see what Arch can do eventually. We'll get there, just not now.
Yeah, because at this point with him, it's almost, could he even possibly live up to the hype that he's already gotten? He is being expected to come in and be this program saver, and that's a lot to be on anybody's shoulders. On top of the fact that he has the Manning last name, so yeah, I do agree. I think it's a long-term thing for him. I think you just have to be delicate with a lot of freshman quarterbacks. It's very rare that freshmen can come in. Trevor Lawrence somehow made it look easy, but freshmen don't come in and just dominate at a high level. So yeah, I think there will be a lot of fan pressure, but I think Sark will make the right move and keep Arch out from starting for sure.
Or Josh Rosen. Remember Josh Rosen? He had a fantastic true freshman year. Oh man, where have those times gone? I think while we're already talking about SEC, let's just kind of bring up a little bit of that man in Tuscaloosa, that man that just doesn't seem to go away, and Nick Saban. So, as said before, Nick Saban is kind of putting himself out on the media a little. I don't want to say too much, but definitely more than what we have seen during his entire career. Basically, he believes that NIL is a recruiting tool, that you don't go to schools to play football or for your education anymore. You go there just to grab a paycheck. So this was a story that was released by Sports Illustrated today, and I'm just going to read the comments from this article. The issue is when you create those collectives for people, are you establishing a pay-for-play type of environment that can be used in recruiting? So now all of a sudden, guys are not going to school where they can create the most value for the future. Guys are going to school where they can make the most money. I don't think that is even the best thing for the players. So when you hear a comment like that, what's your instant takeaway from hearing arguably college football's great talking about this new age era?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, and he catches a lot of slack for this, he does have the best interest of the players in mind. He is citing that the program some of these players are going to, or the situations they're walking into, are not best prepared, or not, preparing them best to get their ultimate goal, which is going to the NFL and going pro. So I see where he's coming from on that front. But listen, we always knew that Saban was going to be a guy that kind of fought against a lot of this change. It was so foreign to the way he grew up. He played college ball. He's coached it forever. He's been around the sport for so long. A drastic change like this was going to cause some negative feedback. And I think he's never a guy that's going to be silenced either. I think he's always going to have his opinions out there, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, I mean, I do think Saban, and then I'll throw Dabo in there as well, as kind of guys that are somewhat adapting to this new era of transfer portal NIL, but they still seem to be fighting against it a little bit. It's a little bit different situation for Dabo. It's hurt him a lot more in these past couple of years, at least with the on the field, success. But I do wonder, especially with Georgia entering this new era of a dynasty, does Saban feel it's starting to slip away with the NIL money? Georgia and A&M are now able to go out there and throw a lot of money around and pull some of those recruits that Alabama usually had on lock. So yeah, I do wonder if this is Saban, hinting at that their dominance in college football might be slipping away, and teams like Georgia, Ohio State's really done well with NIL. You see these big programs that have adapted well are the ones that are still on top. So I am never the person that will doubt Nick Saban. I have incredible respect for him, and I default to picking them to win every game they're in pretty much no matter what. So the man might come back and go undefeated and win the championship this year. and he can give a massive middle finger to the NIL and everything like that if he wants to. But yeah, I'm interested to see how he continues to adapt to this landscape, just because he's, is he just going to retire before, it doesn't get too much for him and he retires? That's another possible outcome. So yeah, I really don't know at this point, but I think knowing him, I think he's going to survive and be all right.
I read those comments and only one image popped into my mind. It was that Abe Simpson meme of that newspaper that is titled "Old Man Yells at Cloud." And we've kind of already, you said it, Saban's been in this game for a long, long time. He's been coaching since before we were born. I don't even think I was born yet when he was coaching at Michigan State. I could be 100% wrong on that, but I don't think he did. But it honestly feels like over the last 2 years, maybe 3, it's kind of feel like Alabama's losing its grip a little bit. And granted, NIL has only been active now for 2 years. Granted, those 2 years, Alabama has not won either one. But when NIL first became a thing, I looked at some of these programs that are in proximity or close to these big markets, like Georgia. You're only an hour away from Athens is only an hour away from Atlanta. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. You got Austin. It's essentially becoming Silicon Valley of the South.
Yeah.
You got to look at a city like A&M even. A&M is literally only an hour and a half from downtown Houston. Downtown Houston is one of the biggest money-making cities in the country right now. It's one of the largest economies in the country right now. These cities, universities, are surrounded by companies that can throw cash at players. I mean, we literally saw Bijan Robinson get a Lamborghini deal. I mean, Christ above. Do you know what I would do at 20 years old and get a contract signed with Lamborghini, for the love of God?
And he had his own mustard. That was awesome.
I'd kill to have my own mayonnaise named after me. But look at Alabama. I've been to Alabama. And I liked Alabama to an extent. I think they got great beaches over there, but it's not a city that screams like cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, like throw money at this person, throw money at this guy. Alabama's had the resources as a football program for a long time, but I don't think the city of Tuscaloosa, I don't think the boosters have the commercial power that some of these other big schools has, like A&M, Georgia, Texas is like I've already said. And even LSU. I mean, LSU has a ton of money backing right there in Baton Rouge. And Ohio State, I think people underestimate how powerful of a city Columbus is. It's one of the best middle market cities in the Midwest in terms of marketability. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the Midwest, even in the country. And I just look at Tuscaloosa and I'm just saying, you got a great college town, and that's fine. You got a great college town. College towns are what makes the college sports great for such a long time. But unfortunately, now as you're being surrounded by more urban, you're being surrounded by more commercial power. I'm not trying to get economically political, but as you have more capitalism surrounding these universities, think about when you're 18 and in college, you would kill to have a $5 bill be thrown in your way just to afford another sandwich.
That's a lifesaver, easily, especially on the weekends.
You would kill to just have someone go down to the bar and be like, hey, I'll buy a drink for you. Mm-hmm. Or a pair of Nike shoes. Most kids that get scholarships to universities may think like, hey, they got it easy for life. You still got to ask your parents, for money for certain parts, for like everyday things that are not covered by your educational expenses. Mm-hmm. So, Saban, I hate to tell you this, but yeah, guess what? A lot of these college kids, they probably didn't even have jobs. They probably didn't even have McDonald's jobs in high school because they were so focused on football. They don't really have an idea of how to handle money yet. So whenever you go to a school, USC, I can't even believe I forgot about USC when we're talking about these big media cities. Mm-hmm. And you have a company that wants you to shoot a commercial, drive around a nice car for Instagram or things like that, and they're willing to put 6 figures right there in front of you, right on the spot. Hell yeah, I'm going to do that. And trust me, I would rather much take a picture of that car, ride it, shoot that commercial. I would easily do that on a Sunnyside beach in Los Angeles than I would be in, I don't want to say Hicktown, Middle America, but maybe Hicktown, Southern America.
Yeah.
I mean, oh man, I got to be careful, man. My
Alabama fans about to be on you after this.
my fiance's father went to Alabama, and he listens
Oof.
to this, so I'm in big trouble at this point. But
Well, I'll swoop in and try to save you. Yeah, but I mean the thing with Alabama is, their two big claims of every other team in the country in recruiting was we're the team everybody has to go through to win national championships, and we're going to put you in the league. Well, they're no longer that team. Georgia's the team that everybody has to go through, so they can't make that claim anymore. And yes, they're still putting a ton of players in the NFL. They had the most combine invites this year. So is Georgia. So is Ohio State at pretty much the same level, if not slightly better these past couple of years. So where does that recruiting edge come from at Alabama now, outside of you have arguably more than likely the greatest coach of all time coaching you? I feel like they've lost that edge in recruiting. And yeah, I feel like on the note of, NIL itself and Saban and some people like Dabo as well accepting it, you got to think about, I mean, being a D1 college athlete, especially at an SEC program, that is like working a full-time job, if not more, you could argue, at least in season. So listen, and they're not able to work, jobs outside of school and football during the season. So they do need to be getting some form of payment otherwise, because you've read so many, horror stories over the years of what, some players had to go through when even sometimes star athletes that,
single parent
scrape it
households.
by for meals. Yeah. And, they couldn't, the living situation was less than ideal. And
Shout
so
out
I
Dion
think
on how he wants his defensive lineman.
yeah, yeah, just that I was stunned reading that, but Dion likes to, he says what's on his mind, and, you can respect that to an extent, I guess. But yeah, I mean, to talk about someone on the opposite end of the spectrum, though, Dion's a guy that's accepted NIL fully. He's doing it his own way, but he's accepted it. He kind of adapted it to his own thing. So, I think on your point about the Alabama boosters not being as strong, I do think that if Alabama was to fall behind on the field, that's the number one thing that wakes up pretty much anybody in the state of Alabama to any issues, is that their football team isn't being successful. So I think they would adapt and pour more money into it if that were to be the case. But again, they do appear just to be a step or two behind. It reminds me a little bit of, again, the Clemson situation and kind of where they are. For both those programs, I feel like this season is a fork in the road. You got Bama dealing with a new quarterback situation, Clemson trying to, get back into the playoff picture. Really interested to see how they both do this season, especially with all this offseason kind of noise they've been going through.
I think the thing that needs to be brought up along with the Clemson and Alabama thing is these are obviously two programs that have arguably been the top two programs in the country, I'd say, over the last 13 years, 14 years, somewhere around that region. Clemson's won 2 national titles in that span, 2 or 3, I forgot, probably 2. But I think whenever you look at how like Dabo is, I'm gonna stay away from slaughtering Saban right now. But when I look at Dabo, the dude does not understand, the persona. I think he's that he gives off to a lot of these players, to a lot of these recruits. I know he's been kind of critical towards NIL in the past, saying that, he was literally the guy that said, "I will quit football if college athletes get paid." I mean, this is a man that literally said that word almost verbatim.
But he's still here.
He's still here. I mean, listen, dude. I mean, that $10 million paycheck that you're getting from Clemson University, I mean, I'm sure it's setting you up really nicely right now. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like that you got to look at some of these other coaches in the program. If you look at Kirby, like coaches like that seem to like care about the players and want their players to go out and do things. I had the privilege to talk to Derek Parrish and D'Anthony Jones of the Houston Cougars last year. And I kind of like asked them, like, how do coaches want players to be in that Houston locker room? And the coaches want them to get paid. Like the coaches literally want them to get their name out there. I mean, obviously football comes first, that don't get me wrong, but the coaches literally want the players to get your bag, do what's best for you and your family. And these two guys, I mean, D'Anthony Jones, he got his own local pizzeria to sponsor him. And I know that Derek got a bar agreement with some bar named Little Woodrow's down here. And it kind of just seems to be the change of pace that we're kind of going through. Even if you look at Lincoln Riley, he seems to be very pro NIL for his players. I've seen Luke Fickell do a couple press conferences, even back when he was at Cincinnati before he took the Wisconsin job. He's been very open about, his players, getting a couple extra bucks in their pocket. Ryan Day at Ohio State, he's kind of been the same way as well. And this is an Ohio State team that was literally a play away from playing in the national title game this last season. So you just look at some of these other programs that may not have the same pedigree as Clemson or Alabama have over the last 15 plus years, but these are still coaches that are always at the top of their game that still want their players to do well for themselves. This is just a new era where I feel like you can't be the hard ass. You have to be in at 5 a.m. and you have to stay till 10 p.m. every night. It's just not the environment that we're in anymore. Players have to look out for themselves because, I mean, we kind of joke a little bit about what Dion was saying about like how he wants his quarterbacks to, have a 2-parent household and two floor house or whatever he was saying.
Pretty much laid out their life plan.
Literally. And you look at and you hear what he was talking about, defensive lineman saying like 1 bedroom, ghetto ass or whatever he was saying. Like he essentially wants his defensive lineman to be poor growing up. I mean, appreciate the heads up, Dion. I mean, now I know I really had no future going into the college game in high school, but it's kind of just like this is, and he's doing his own way. I mean, remember, he's a Barstool guy, right? He's a coach that's literally still contracted to Barstool. And I think he's even used that. I think he's even used that power to an extent to even like lure in players to get into his program. I mean, the way that he's been able to get guys into Colorado has just been insane.
Yeah, and to take a broader perspective on all this, I believe it was last fall before the season started. Eli Drinkwitz here at the beautiful University of Missouri went on to say that while he believes all the changes that are happening in college football are good between realignment, NIL, transfer portal, he believes that they're all too big changes that are happening way too quickly. And therefore we're in the midst right now of this 4 to 5 year period of which everybody's trying to figure things out. People are finding loopholes everywhere. There's no real guidelines for how a lot of this works, at least to most people. And yeah, we're kind of going through that bumpy phase right now. And I think at the end of it, everybody will come out, well adjusted. But, you could even look at this as a phase where, you're kind of cutting the fat, and everybody that can't adapt to this new era, that is clearly, I mean, it's not going to be, NIL isn't going to be reversed. The transfer portal isn't going to be, canceled. Everything's going to be here to stay. So it's either adapt or risk your program, falling into irrelevancy, relatively to where they were before. So I'm not necessarily concerned with Alabama in that instance. Clemson, a little bit more just in terms of I think they could fall back to where they were in the early 2010s, where it was 8, 9, 10 wins max a year. But, I think Saban will adapt in his own way, but I don't think he's ever going to stop being outspoken about it. And frankly, knowing him, I don't think he's a guy that necessarily cares about the backlash he may get from saying some of these things. So, going forward, I am very interested to see how does Alabama, look in the field? How do they continue to do in recruiting compared to these other schools? Are our schools going to be able to start claiming the crown over them in that regard after they've kind of had a stranglehold on recruiting for so long up until these past 2 years or so? So, yeah, I think, Saban's legacy it's set in stone as one of the greatest of all time right now. How it finishes and how he handles NIL and how his teams finish out will alter kind of how we look at him towards the end of his tenure and overall, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. So we spoke a little bit on Colorado. So this kind of goes into the next step. Right now, the Big 12, people thought they were dead. They're back there alive. We'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah.
And here we are talking about another conference that we think may be going down the drain a little bit, the Pac-12. So it has recently been confirmed that the Big 12 has contacted 4 Pac-12 teams to potentially join the Big 12 in the near future. Those schools, as I said right now, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. I only care about Colorado and Utah, okay? I don't really care what Arizona or Arizona State brings to the table. They've been off my mind ever since I read that headline. But what would you say your biggest takeaways are as you hear about, like, here's the Big 12 trying to expand? People thought they were dead after Oklahoma and Texas were confirmed leaving, but they bring in 4 of the most successful non-Power 5 programs of the last 10 years. And now they're bringing up arguably the best team in the Pac-12 the last 2 years, and a bit of an enigma in Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, for me, a person I grew up as an Oregon fan, the Pac-12 did this themselves. This was kind of written in the stars for years now, and it's all kind of culminating now. I think the biggest thing they have to blame themselves for, over the horrible TV deals and exposure and everything like that, when realignment started to really take focus, I mean, kind of last summer, I guess, is when it really got the ball rolling with the Big Ten and the SEC. The Big 12 was the first conference that started to say, we're going to go get other teams. We're going to start reaching out and we're going to try to survive. The Pac-12 set status quo pretty much during that time period. And that's why they're sitting where they are now. And they're going to be the one that's having teams poached as opposed to vice versa. So this new look Big 12 is going to be really interesting. You got this first season where you got 14 teams in the conference because Oklahoma and Texas are still, got one more season left. But yeah, I mean, I think each of those new teams brings something unique to the table. I mean, you can even talk about a basketball perspective with how the conference will probably improve overall with those new teams. But yeah, I mean, on a football stage, I think Arizona State, they bring a new kind of a region into the conference, and I think they could tread water. But yeah, I think you look at Utah and Colorado, I agree, as the two that have the most potential. Kyle Whittingham's, I would argue, has one of the most consistent programs in the country right now, at least over the past 10 years.
Totally
and
transformed it.
Exactly. And I mean, in Colorado, the sky's the limit for what they're going to do with Dion. I mean, again, we'll see if that experiment works out overall. I don't think, we should be all in saying Dion's going to be the answer. But I mean, you put Dion in the Big 12 where he's going to be able to recruit way better, in a conference that is going to be more respected than the Pac-12. I think Colorado could end up being one of the top teams in that conference in the long term. You're going to be competing with Oklahoma State. I think Houston long term is going to do really well in the Big 12 just with the recruiting area that they have and now being able to be in a power conference. But yeah, I think Utah can come in and have immediate success. I think Colorado could come in and be the eventual headliner of that conference, kind of rechanneling some of their old stomping grounds in the Big 8 and such. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. I think they'll definitely get pulled away from the Pac-12. I think they'll probably make a deal, maybe not this year, but I mean, the way it's going, it might be this year. But yeah, I think those four are probably going to make that move soon. I think the Pac-12 probably, I mean, I don't know if you agree, but I think the Pac-12 dissolves after that. I think Oregon and Washington are probably the next two to go. And I don't know where you go from there. Mountain West maybe pluck some of the other teams.
I'm glad you said that. Just imagine, we live in an era where a Mountain West could literally have more leverage than the Pac-12 can right now.
It's unbelievable.
I was talking to last year. I was talking to Colin Wilder, former Wisconsin Badger. Now he's an assistant coach over at Coastal Carolina. And I asked him, he played college football for 7 seasons. I don't even know how you get that many years of eligibility, but I kind of asked him. I was like, you obviously know a lot of stuff from when you started playing in 2016, and when he finished his career in 2022. What were some changes that he could envision seeing, as we go into this new NIL era, transfer portal, everything. And he brought up something that I thought was very noteworthy, that I don't want to say he was out of whack, but I feel like, I was like, okay, we'll see about this. And he predicted that the Pac-12 was going to be dissolving in 5 years. And you kind of look at it and it's like, you already lose 2 of the top 4 highest grossing universities in the Pac-12 in USC and UCLA. They're going to the Big Ten starting next year. There's been talk of Washington and Oregon bouncing right off the bat. I've heard Big Ten. I've heard Big 12 at times. And then now you're looking at Stanford, who hasn't had much on-field success since those early Rose Bowl years. I mean, David Shaw left the program, I believe now. It's like, I already forgot if he did, but now you're looking at Colorado that's coming up, and it's like, okay, now we got Dion's ring coming up, and now it's like the future isn't even Pac-12 anymore. The brand is more about Colorado than it is about the Pac-12. Utah is one of those programs where I feel like they could go into almost any conference in the country right now, and they could compete. Maybe bar the SEC, yep. But in terms of Big 12, Big 10, ACC, we didn't even talk about how bad the ACC's TV deal is. That's got to be noteworthy. But you look at the Pac-12, and I totally agree with you. Pac-12 has some great programs. You got Oregon, you got Washington, you got USC, you got a lot of these big name programs. UCLA, they haven't been the most successful program, for a while, but they're still a big name. It's still a huge university. Stanford is one of the most prestigious universities. They hold the academics in college football to a high standard. Nobody that plays college football at Stanford doesn't get. I think they're the only university where you have to meet their academic standards to play for the program.
Yeah.
And now it's like, how does the Pac-12 that have all these prestigious universities, including Cal Berkeley, and you just kind of just let the union die?
And it seemed too easy almost. It seems like they've almost rolled over and let it happen, And I know that they've tried to do things, but I mean, I think it's too
They didn't do
little, too
anything
late.
until they realized it was too late. The second that the USC and the UCLA news dropped, that's when they're like, "Oh, dang it, we got screwed." Now they got to try to do something. Now they're trying to hold USC and UCLA hostage from making the move. They literally got California lawmakers involved, and it's like, dude, how come just now you're putting this much effort to trying to save your conference? Like, listen, we all love Pac-12 After Dark, but at the same time, it shouldn't have to be an after dark situation to promote your conference.
Yeah. And it's also a lot of these teams have, you haven't had a playoff team for the Pac-12 since 2016, Washington. And it's just, these teams want to be nationally relevant again. And it's so difficult. You have to be the elite of the elite in the Pac-12 to do that, and you've seen, the Pac-12 tends to beat itself up, which really doesn't help. But I just think, USC and UCLA were like, where's the money going to be and where's the national attention going to be for the next 20, 30 years? It's going to be on the Big Ten and the SEC. So we're going to go join up with that. I think Oregon and Washington will probably do the same thing down the line. But yeah, I mean, you look at these programs and they weren't fine with settling for this mediocrity that the Pac-12 had essentially accepted. And yeah, I agree. I mean, way too little, too late. And you saw what a delayed reaction does. I think the Big 12 went very well about it. I was stunned the Pac-12 did not push harder for San Diego State. Surely they must have had a conversation with Boise because it never was even public that they reached out to them.
I don't know how you try not to grab Boise as
exactly
like Boise State being part of the Pac-12 honestly feels like a move that should have been done 10 years ago.
They've been beating up on the conference almost every year.
TCU got to move to a Power 5 conference faster than what Boise State did.
Yeah.
There's just, you look at the Pac-12 and it's like, I don't want to compare it to dying animals, but they literally just put themselves in the middle of the interstate and are allowing themselves to be roadkill for the rest of the country. And now it's like, I don't know where you put Washington or Oregon now. Where are those guys going to go? Because I feel like at this point, if you're Oregon or Washington, the first conference between the Big Ten and the Big 12 to call you up, you probably take the first deal that hits your doorstep.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're going to be pretty, especially with how Washington looked this past season and what Kim DeVore is building there. You're going to bring two contenders into your conference if you add them, which I think is something all these conferences are really looking for. So, yeah, another thing that we haven't touched on too much, though, I'm eager to see is, what happens to an Oregon State program that's building and looking better. You throw out Washington State as well. Where are they going to go? Mountain West, I guess. And then that's a massive downgrade. And then
Oregon
they're
State
suffer.
Reminds me of that Community meme where he comes in with the pizzas and then he sees the living room being set on fire because Oregon State finally has a great year. For the amount of terribleness that they've had for the last 5 to 10 years since the Brandon Cooks era and Sean Mannion, forgotten college football legend, by the way. They finally have a great season. They win did they win? Were they the LA Bowl? I forgot which bowl they were in.
Yeah, LA, and they beat Florida. Yeah,
and they win a bowl game. They finally have a really good looking offense. They beat Oregon and Corvallis, and now they finally feel like they could take the next step as a Pac-12 team. And they see their conference just absolutely get decimated. They finally have a chance to be a contender going to next season, and now they're probably just looking at themselves like, well, ain't nobody else want to be here, so why do we?
Yeah, and you look even further than that. The Apple Cup and the Civil War probably won't exist once Oregon and Washington move away, unless they can somehow work that out as well. So you're going to lose those rivalries. Yeah, Washington State as well, who is always. They've always been a program that's kind of hung around, but they've been a valued team in the Pac-12 purely because they've had some one-off great years and they've always pulled off some upsets. So yeah, and then I mean, again, also the other two we haven't talked about, Stanford and Cal in the Bay Area, two very prestigious universities, could immediately upgrade the academic standing of any conference they come into. And we've seen what Stanford's potential can be at times. So, I think those are two worthy additions, but where are they going to go? Because I'll be stunned if the Pac-12, if they lose Oregon and Washington and they try to survive, I think it's going to be somehow even uglier than it is now. And I really think they would
Just
just need
pack
to
it
give
up.
up
Just
at
pack
that
your
point.
losses.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point,
Because,
and it goes back to what you said about the TV deal. I mean, let's ask a serious question here. What percentage of America carries the Pac-12 network on their television?
not many, considering myself that grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, could never watch Oregon football games, and they're on Pac-12 Network, and it was frustrating every single time.
I have YouTube TV as my TV provider. I've tried getting all the sports sections, still couldn't get it. I was checking out Fubo TV, still couldn't get it. I mean, I don't know what I'd do, without watching a 3-8 Stanford against a 5-6. I'm
Cal,
Cal. I mean,
yeah,
or Arizona.
is
There you go, Arizona. I mean, look, Arizona might begin that. I mean, and it goes back to what you said about basketball. Arizona going to the Big 12 would be huge for basketball.
oh yeah, that would be. I mean, Big 12 would probably be the best conference in basketball at that point if they were to add Houston and then Arizona. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I point out, I even look at 2015 Christian McCaffrey, who was not talked about for the Heisman barely at all up until those final couple weeks of the season and still didn't even earn it, where you saw a lot of major analysts and people saying, well, McCaffrey, if he played in the East Coast, he would have easily won this, and you've seen multiple players like that haven't been able to break through that East Coast bias just because they don't have that exposure.
Do you feel
It
like
was
Michael
almost
Penix
like,
could have been in that same situation?
yeah, I mean, yeah, you could throw Penix out there. I mean, Mariota was the last one that truly kind of broke through that. And that was because he was a known commodity coming into his Heisman season already. So, but on those TV deals, yeah, it was almost like the Pac-12 network was saying, it's like they felt like they had an exclusive product that people were going to want to search out and go find. Nobody's going to pay for that subscription to Pac-12 network, especially if it's so hard to get across the country for a conference that is year in and year out generally either the fourth or fifth best Power Five conference. So they should have opted to make it way more available, build the brand, and then bring in some more money through subscriptions or what have you, as opposed to trying to be like, I think maybe they rode the coattails of the USC mid 2000s to Oregon early 2010s era, and maybe they were like, oh, we're still going to be on top of the Pac-12 landscape. When Oregon and USC fell off, the conference seemed to kind of fall off as a whole as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's done. I think it's over. It's sad to see a lot of, I mean, you mentioned Pac-12 After Dark. So many great games, so many great players have come through that conference. It will be sad to see, but I think it's for the best for literally everybody involved except for the conference themselves, I suppose.
I mean, kind of it goes back a little bit what you're saying about the Christian McCaffrey. I mean, I literally read that it's a legit conspiracy theory that the reason why Christian McCaffrey didn't win the Heisman that year is because all the voters were already asleep by the time that Stanford went to go play.
Yeah, pretty much.
And no disrespect to Utah, because we just got done praising Utah and how well they turned that program around. Ever since Urban Meyer was there, and how Kyle Whittingham was even to keep it even more consistent. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, you still need USC to be the big boy of your brand. You still need Oregon. Oregon is Nike University. They have the name, they have the power to be a king in college football. Even Washington has a rich history. It's a prestigious university. It's a great university. It's one of the best ranked universities in the West Coast that's not named Stanford and Cal. It's really high up there, but it's just like, I'm still trying to understand how you let all this die at once. You have, you need a brand to stay strong. And unfortunately for the Pac-12, they just have not let it happen at all.
Series of poor decisions. I guess that's the only explanation, I think. And I also think we touched on a little bit of lack of forward thinking is the other big part of this. That's why, I mean, I again will give credit to the Big 12 for jumping on the situation early on and being able to pull some new teams in, and now to where The Big 12 sets them up potentially. I'm interested to see your thoughts on it. When the Big 10 and SEC become those two power conferences, if the Big 12 were to add Colorado, Utah on top of who they're already adding, and maybe a team like Oklahoma State or TCU really rises to some national prominence as well, I think they could be that third power conference that probably isn't on the same level as the Big 10 and the SEC, but they're very close and they could still stay nationally relevant, which I think is their goal here, is to still be able to contend as, thinking far down the line. We're looking at Power 4 conference, and then eventually if the ACC does break up, which who knows if that'll happen, it might end up being a Power 3. I credit the Big 12 for how they kind of thought ahead with this, the opposite for the Pac-12 with how they so clearly did not.
I'll say this about the Big 12, and I'm super proud that my school, University of Houston, is part of the Big 12. The Big 12 is hot as, Big 10 and SEC. They may snipe universities, but you know what? The Big 12, they have shown that they can prepare better than any conferences from this recuperating losses. And kind of what you're saying about the ACC has arguably the worst television deal among all the conferences. And thank God, and they better count all their flowers that Florida State is going to be arguably a top 5 team in the country this upcoming season, because right now the ACC product is dying right now. They have a terrible TV deal up until 2036. Right now, they make the least amount of money of all the Power 5 conferences. As I said, it's less than the Pac-12, and their TV deal doesn't expire until 2036.
And there's already rumblings from FSU and Clemson saying that they're looking into, if that TV deal and that revenue does not raise, that they're looking into trying to get out of the contract somehow. It'd be very difficult for them to do it, but at the end of the day, money talks. And if those big name programs want to move conferences and they feel like it's the only solution, I think they're going to make that happen. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think impatience wins out with a lot of these programs. And I think we could see Florida State and Clemson trying to make that SEC move before 2030, honestly. I think that's just kind of written in the cards. But yes, I do agree. I think the biggest thing, Florida State coming back was the first step to the ACC returning to relevance. I think you need either Miami, Virginia Tech, or UNC to enter that, let's say consistent top 15 every season kind of tier. I think you get that and you add that to Clemson, FSU, then you've got a product that you can continue to sell. But yeah, they need more contenders. I mean, it was the issue with the Pac-12. You had only Washington that was a lead for a long time. Then it was Oregon for a little bit within this past kind of 10 years or so. So yeah, I think the ACC is it's following with the TV deal and then the lack of on-field success. It's following a eerily similar path to the Pac-12, which has to be scary for the programs involved and, everybody involved with the conference.
It's the death of a lot of these both those conferences. You have quite a bit of good teams, but you don't have enough great teams. And that's the biggest issue, because you've got good teams that go 9-3, borderline 10-2. But if you don't make that playoff, guess what? That revenue, I've read something, the amount of money that a conference makes off of a representation in the playoff is freaking insane. I forgot how many millions of dollars that the conference itself gets when a team makes the playoff. But right now, if you're the ACC, if you're the Pac-12, right now, I don't even think you can even anticipate that. The Big 12, they're living it perfectly. They're going to thank TCU for making that playoff for eternity.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So,
and Clemson's been carrying the ACC for a while now with their pocketbooks. So yeah, same deal.
All right, Parker. Any closing thoughts as we finish this up?
No, not necessarily. I guess I've got some articles coming up where I'm looking at coaching hot seats, and then also kind of a deep dive. And we touched a little bit on the new teams in the Big 12. I'm doing a dive into kind of their schedule and how they're going to pan out this season. So yeah, be sure to check that out when it comes up.
I'll be keeping an eye on how well you rate Houston, that's for sure. But
favorably, I will say.
Will I be happy?
Oh, you will be. I think so.
Yay. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Once again, if you like the show, give us a like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, 5-star reviews, smash that like button, all the great stuff. Leave a comment below, give us a thought on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. All right, Parker, y'all have a great night.